He's Tim McDonald. I'm Bobby Broyles. Welcome to the latest edition of This Week in CAA Football, presented by GEICO. No need to build up what begins this Saturday. Conference play will officially be underway for several teams.
Wow, short and sweet. Thank you, Bob. That was the shortest intro you've ever had. Appreciate it. More time for me. Thank you. Well, like you said, 6 teams start conference play. We got 3 games across the board. UNH picks up their first win last week. They're going to head to Richmond. James Madison coming in this week with 2 straight wins. They head to Villanova. And Albany, sitting at 2-0, had a bye week. They're going to head to Rhode Island. Really great matchups coming up here. Like you said, it's exciting time because it's conference play, but also large implications across the board. I'm interested to see what happens. Of course, you can afford to lose a game here early. If people are saying, oh, if this team loses, they're not going to win the CAA. There's a lot of football left to play. It's one game, but still a lot of implications early. Especially, you look across the board how the league did last week, I should say. 14-5 now against FCS in non-conference play, and of course, only one non-FCS Division I game. So still only one of those. I know a lot of conferences struggle to find games, but that's why I like CAA football. Only one non-D1 game. Of course, like I said, Bob, a lot of implications this week, and I'm just excited to see how it plays out.
I'll be quick again, Tim, starting out of the gates with the JMU Dukes, who take that 2-game winning streak up to Villanova to face the well-rested Wildcats.
Villanova had a great season last year, a little bit disappointing, but let's remember, they lost to JMU at JMU. A little bit of a rebound game, I think. JMU enters this game off 2 wins, like we mentioned, but I think they've really struggled against the run. We look at the last 2 opponents that JMU has faced, 287 yards on the ground against Lehigh, 292 yards against St. Francis last week. What does Villanova like to do?
Run the ball.
Run the ball. And we know this week, Andy Talley mentioned John Robertson, Jonathan Football himself, has a fractured bone on his non-throwing hand. I don't know how many QBs you've seen wearing a cast during a game. Hasn't been many for me, especially a QB who likes to run. So that's something to obviously keep an eye on. Still, Coach Talley was adamant in saying that it didn't give John Robertson any pain in the Fordham game, and he played pretty well in that game. It's an interesting game. Villanova plays at home versus JMU. It's going to be a rush versus rush. Still, I'm expecting guys like Sage Harold, Gage Steele, the JMU defense, I'm expecting them to spy on John Robertson all day long. I think you got to make him beat him with your feet. Gary Underwood and Poppy Livers, the receivers of Villanova, keys this week. I think they got to play huge.
That game will be televised live at 12:30 on Comcast Sportsnet, and the broadcast will also be simulcast on CA.TV. If you like the sound of that one, Tim, don't change a channel possibly for some people. On Comcast Sportsnet at 4 o'clock and also on CA.TV, New Hampshire invades Robin Stadium to take on the Richmond Spiders. These 2 teams have played some classics in the past.
Yes, sir, they have. They did not play last year, but look at the last 2 times they played, like you said. 2011 at Richmond, 45-43. UNH gets the win, scores late. 2012, 44-40. UNH escapes at home versus Richmond. Again, 2 teams we know love to throw the ball, love that tempo, Bob. And not to say that their defenses take a back seat, but in these games, in the past contests, they've shown offenses are going to take the front seat. I like at this game, and it's interesting. You look at Richmond, they're going to be without Stephen Barnett, the stud wide receiver. They're also going to be possibly without Seth Fisher, the running back. New Hampshire, on the other hand, they're going to be without Nico Storetti, possibly, had a high ankle sprain. Dalton Crossan still hasn't played this year. So both their weapons, I think, are going to change how this game is dictated. Of course, last week, Richmond got it done at home, passed the ball all over the place like they knew they would. But let's face it, Hampton and Morehead State, the 2 wins that they have, are nothing like what they're going to see versus New Hampshire. Exactly. And on the other side, New Hampshire played really well versus Lehigh, but I think it's an even bigger test this week versus Richmond. I like to throw out this stat, Bob. You are 66% on 3rd down, leads the FCS. That's going to be absolutely key. That New Hampshire defense is going to get tested, whether it's Michael Strauss throwing the ball quick or whether it's like we see last week what Richmond did. They ran the ball. Jacoby Green had 150 yards rushing. Huge week for him. Only a 2nd game as a Spider over 100 yards. That's going to be key this week. It's going to be a shootout. And if you're home watching at 4 o'clock, I don't know what else you should be watching. This is the game to watch.
Absolutely. 66% on 3rd down conversions. That is a great stat. Let's backtrack to 1 o'clock on Saturday as Albany tries to improve to 3-0 to start the year. The Great Danes head to Kingston to take on Rhode Island in the final conference matchup this Saturday.
And after that Holy Cross win for Albany in week 1, we say, they pulled it out, good for them, it's great. Then the next week they go to Central Connecticut State, shut down the Blue Devils' run offense, get a win, blank them 17-0. Now all of a sudden, here come the Great Danes. Fresh off a bye week. We know Rhode last week played at Fordham, and Rhode was in that game earlier if you watched that game. Rhode had a great chance. First play of the game on defense, Rhode picks off Michael Niebrick of Fordham. Eventually, Rhode had some great turnovers and caused a lot of... Then the 2nd quarter, 3rd quarter, 4th quarter, Rhode kind of just fell apart a little bit, end up losing that game. Albany can keep the momentum train rolling in this game. And I think it's a really big game. Not only we know they want to probably get the ground game going with Omar Osborne, I'm going to look at Wolfiaki again. I love highlighting Wolfiaki because when he's rolling, this team is rolling.
Yep.
Let's not forget, too, Rhode Island, if you pick up a win here at home in CAA football play, you can erase those first 2 losses. You Albany, 3-0. Who'd have thought that would be sitting pretty if you're Rhode Island? Big implications for both squads.
Of course, the Danes still looking for that elusive first
That's right.
conference
Thank you.
win.
They haven't even won a CAA football game, right? That's
yes,
right.
This could possibly be the weekend for you, Albany. Probably the best news about this contest.
That's true.
Is that CAA.TV will make its on-campus debut at this game. We'll have more details on that later in the show. Now for the non-conference action around CAA football on Saturday, starting with a nationally televised game on ESPN3 at 1 in Chestnut Hill, a game between Maine and ACC foe Boston College.
This is either a really good thing or a really bad thing for Maine. BC, of course, beat the USC Trojans last week at home in a game where they just rushed all over the Trojans, over 300 yards rushing. The quarterback, Tyler Murphy's a Florida transfer. He was basically a running back. Didn't pass the ball that much, but they beat USC really handily. And Maine coming off a tough loss versus Bryant. That was on the road. Maine right now is only averaging 10 points a game. I look at Dan Collins, the quarterback there. He's only attempted 41 throws this season. Again, it's going to be hard to say, let's go get the offensive going against a really good BC team. Maine played well at BC a couple years back, only lost 34-3. They were in that game early. Historically, Maine's played well in FBS games. I just think it's going to be a really tough task on the road. Jack Cosgrove said this week, they're not going down just for show. They're going there to win.
Yes, they really do need to get that offense on track, though. Especially would love to see it happen in this game.
10 points per game, Bob.
Before conference season starts. Then at 6, Towson looks to keep the momentum going at home versus North Carolina Central.
Towson has won its last 4 games versus MEAC foes. That includes last week's game at Delaware State. Look at that game at halftime. A lot of people freaking out on Twitter, seeing Towson's down 7-3 at half. Tigers got back on track. Of course, they needed an 81-yard punt return, Bob. That was huge versus Delaware State. And eventually got the ground game going, outgained the Hornets 221-71 in yardage. We know that's where they're going to get the job done. Darius Victor had 130 yards. That's going to be the key for this team. I think it's nice to come at home. Let's remember the last time Towson was at home, they were pretty embarrassed. They played fat, and they came out flat and played bad at home versus Central Connecticut State in the opener. Another chance of redemption. Right now, not a lot of people sleeping on the weeds at Towson. Great opportunity at home.
Derek Joseph taking that punt return back. Feels like every other week he's taking some type of special teams return back for a touchdown. At 7, Stony Brook travels west to take on North Dakota out of the Big Sky Conference.
A nice little matchup for conference clashes here. I like the fact that you look at the schedule. A couple years back, 5 years ago, Stony Brook headed out there again. Ended up losing that game, but still another matchup with a Big Sky team. Where you look at the grand scheme of the FCS, it's nice to see these type of games. Both these teams entered the game 1-2. Stony Brook, of course, got back on track at home last week versus American International. It wasn't the prettiest of games, but 20-3, that's a pretty good win for them. Had 2 100-yard rushers for the first time since 2012. James Kenner, the running back, he's back. He rushed for over 100 yards last week. Bad news is they lost Stacey Vidal to an injury. We don't know how serious that is, but still, I expect Stony Brook to go. This is really going to be a game, 2 offenses that struggle. North Dakota only had 166 yards of offense last week. Also desperately needs a win at home. It's a nice game to watch if you're looking for 2 teams who maybe don't exactly know what their identities are, but are trying to get there slowly but surely.
Also at 7, the William & Mary Tribe wraps up their non-conference schedule at home with a date with Lafayette.
The last time the Leopards visited Williamsburg, they snuck away with a win in week 2. Okay, that was 2 years ago, but they won 17-14, and a lot of William & Mary players remember that game. Not just because it was a Patriot League team coming and beating a CAA football team, but it was a little bit of a shock.
It was a shock.
Lafayette's a good team out of the Patriot League, don't get me wrong, but that still was a shock a couple years ago. William & Mary, the last 2 games, if you look at the stats, their defense, of course, has shined and shown through, but it's been the little things that they've been getting it done. It's been, a couple of pick sixes, a couple of fumble recoveries, a blocked punt. Whether it's deep, it's been big plays. Offensively, William & Mary's struggled a little bit at times. We know the defense has given up a lot of pass yards. The last 2 games, they've actually been outgained in passing yards by Hampton and Norfolk State. Still, I like the fact that they're in the Berg, and they're playing Lafayette, and they remember what happened 2 years ago.
Stephen Clue, of course, has Trey McBride returning.
Thank you. Yeah, I think he had 101 yards and a touchdown last week.
So maybe they'll even continue to try to expand that offense a little bit. We conclude Week 4 with a televised contest on the American Sports Network and CAA.TV, with Elon playing host to Charlotte at 7 o'clock.
A tough loss for the Phoenix last week versus NCAA&T. That's a good team, NCAA&T. Lost at Coastal Carolina at home the week before by 1 point. Elon last week versus A&T only generated 12 points, and all those coming off John Gallagher's field goals. At least you know you got a good kicker.
Yes.
Still, Elon, I think this is a chance at home again to progress. This is a Charlotte team that's relatively new, only their second year of football, moving on up to the FBS eventually, but right now they're 3-0 entering this game. Charlotte has a lot of confidence coming in, saying we're going to go to a CAA football team and try to win this game. Elon, on the other hand, I think just keep progressing offensively. Let's remember it's a new system, only 12.5 points per game right now, and Elon hasn't thrown a touchdown pass yet. I'd like to see the offense improve a little bit, maybe stick to the guns a little bit, see what happens. I still think Elon at home has to be happy to have this game and just get another shot at winning. Can't do too much at once if you're Elon.
Yep. So to find where Saturday's games will be televised in your area, head to CAAfootball.com and check your local listings. And remember, each of the Comcast Sportsnet and ASN games on Saturday will also be simulcast live on CAA.tv.
And check back to CAAfootball.com on Sunday, of course, for the rundown. And don't be shy. Interact with our league on many social media platforms. We have Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And of course, you can interact with us using the hashtag CAAFB.
As mentioned, CAA.tv makes its on-campus debut this weekend in Rhode Island for the big game between the Rams and the Great Danes. Stay tuned to CAAfootball.wordpress.com for highlights from the trip, and don't miss our Going Deep feature on Rhode next Tuesday at CAAfootball.com.
And CAA Football on campus isn't the only program debuting this week. Bobby and I will give our try at the airwaves with the CAA Football Yak podcast, which kicks off tomorrow on every day is Saturday on our blog. That's right, the league is finally letting this guy go on the airwaves, and I apologize ahead of time.
I can't believe they gave us permission for this. Don't worry, I promise we won't let this guy at the same time take over the spotlight too much.
We'll say we got to give the people what they love, Bob.
So. You're right. I guess we will have to wait until next week to see. Until next time, enjoy Saturday, everyone.